This is Sarah, and I just want to take a moment to speak to you about this week's sponsor, Favor. Favor Inc. is a statewide family-led nonprofit 501c3 organization that is committed to empowering families as advocates and partners in improving educational and health outcomes for our children. Favor is the Connecticut state organization of the Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health. Favor offers a single place for families with children who have medical, mental, emotional, and behavioral health challenges to find information, assistance, and training. To find out more about Favor, please go to favor-ct.org. We are grateful for our opportunity to work with Favor as a sponsor, and now on to the rest of the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Caregiver Chronicles. My name is Sarah, and today I have special guest Afsaneh Moradian. She is a homeschool coach who works with parents of neurodivergent children. She is also the founder of MLC Homeschool Coaching. Hello, Afsaneh. How are you today?
I'm so great, Sarah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Would you like to further introduce yourself to my audience?
Sure. Well, I am, as Sarah said, my name is Afsaneh Moradian, the founder of MLC Homeschool Coaching. I am a longtime educator and curriculum writer and children's book author as well. And over the course of my teaching career, I have taught everyone from preschool all the way through graduate school, and I pretty much have seen it all. So I am so excited to be here and get to talk with other parents about, how to make homeschooling and educating your kids go a little smoother.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yes, you do have an extensive background in education. Do you want to talk about what brought you to homeschool?
Sure, because it really wasn't my intention. I mean, I have a degree in teaching and I love teaching, and I always saw homeschooling as sort of the antithesis of that. And I had spoken with other homeschooling parents who were very dismissive of teachers, like, you don't need to know anything to be a teacher. But I have a master's and I'm a doctoral candidate and I'm writing a dissertation and I have to know a lot to be, So it really was not the plan. And then when my child started to go to preschool, we didn't have any play-based preschools in our area. They were only academic preschools. And it really wasn't a good fit for our 3-year-old. Our child was 3 when they started going. And I saw such a change in behavior where they were great at school. No complaints, no behavior issues at all at school. But then when they came home, it was a completely different person than who I was used to. And the behavior was atrocious. And I realized this tiny human has to use every ounce of energy and effort that they have to behave themselves, but to do every single thing that is asked of them. And the preschool day was so highly controlled that the kids had to do what the teacher said in the way the teacher said it. So aside from, recess and a little bit of free play at the end of the day, it was, here's the craft. These are the colors, glue this here, paint this red. And there was never an opportunity to just be yourself or be creative or have any freedom at all. And my child couldn't take it. So when they came home, they couldn't handle being told what to do and how to do it. Even if it was, don't rock the chair because you'll fall back and hurt yourself. It's like, no. So I recognized the drastic behavior change. I realized what was going on. And then I had to decide, did I want this to be my relationship and my experience with my child, or was I willing to take on their education so that I could actually enjoy the best and the worst? Because we're always going to experience the worst with our kids, with their parents. But did I also want the best, or was my child going to give their best to a classroom setting, and then I was only going to get the worst? So that wasn't really okay with me. And I don't think that that's a sign of a thriving child or an adequate educational environment, to be honest. So if we had had other options, I think we probably would have tried other options. But getting into homeschooling it was, really something for me to have to struggle to figure out, but it was really awesome and amazing from the beginning for our child. So I stand by it, but it made me appreciate, and I have a high needs child, and it made me really appreciate the struggle and the difficulties that parents experience, because I experienced so many and I had a background in education and child development. And I thought, well, I really need to get in there and help parents with this, because it doesn't have to be so much of a struggle. There are changes that can be made in communication and learning experiences that can transform, that can make it go from, power struggles and meltdowns and explosions and exhaustion to actually a really lovely collaborative experience where there's more connection being developed through the process. So that's how I went from homeschooling to then homeschool coaching.
That's amazing, though. There's so much back and forth, and I'm kind of glad that you mentioned that a little bit, between like the education community, like like public education, private education, and in homeschool community. There can be a lot of stigma about homeschool, and I'm sure we I don't know if you went to public school growing up or not, but we all knew those quote unquote weird homeschool kids who wore prairie dresses or whatever else it was. There's always that stigma to it. And how, so I guess I want to ask you, like you're you're reasonable. You're not homeschooling your kid because you're anti-vax or anti-government, or you're not, or like hardcore religious. I don't know all of your values, but I'm gonna say, you're not homeschooling based off those. You're homeschooling based off of your child's needs. How do you break the stigma for the other things?
So I think the social part is important, but when you look at child development, in the first years of a child's life, they're not really able to play with other kids. We see more parallel play, and depending on the child's development, that can even go further, right? That can take more years where they're just playing next to another child. And there are even some adults who grow up and we still see them parallel playing, that they're near the adults that are talking, but they're on their phone, or they're somewhat removed. So that sense of parallel play is how kids start. The most important relationships are the strong, loving, connected relationships to adults. And in some cases to older siblings, if there are any. That's not the case in my family. We were one and done. We were not going to do that again. So, but having those close connections to an adult, a parent, could be a grandparent, could be a babysitter, could be, but really that's the thing that means the most to the child, feeling confident and having a sense of self and feeling like they can tackle new situations and try new challenges because they trust that this person who loves them, who they love, is going to be there to support them through it. So that actually is the most important when we're talking about preschool into kindergarten, first grade, those early years where all that really important development and learning happens. And later on, it's not to say, oh, lock them in your house and never go anywhere, right? Because that's not what homeschooling is. Homeschooling is really about experiences. So the library and, looking at what kinds of programs at museums and libraries and, if it's free, that's even better, right? That's why I say libraries. But really, exposing kids to other people, other kids. So for us, homeschooling was never about isolating our child from other kids and the outside world. It was that my child's learning shouldn't be dependent on other people, that my child should get to learn what they're interested in and go as far as they can go. And I'm not going to put restrictions on that. And I don't want other kids putting restrictions on that or other adults putting restrictions on that. So you can take a topic and go as far as the child wants to go with it and not say, oh, well, we're going to stop here because this is what you learned in first grade. Like, no, let's keep going and you can learn way more and it's okay. And so the whole grade level thing gets a little wonky when you homeschool because the kids tend to gravitate towards certain topics, certain subjects, and really run and advance with it, and be a little less interested in others. And so sometimes the learning is a bit uneven, but because if it's customized and really you're very tuned into your child and how they learn and how to support them when they struggle, you get past that, and they do develop in all the different areas. So that to me is, where those after school programs come in, the extracurriculars come in to, of course, kids need friends if they want them. If a child suffers from social anxiety, then you have to kind of look for creative ways to find those interactions, maybe more online, maybe through a game, maybe, there's all kinds of other ways to look for it. But it just doesn't have to actually be that the learning is based on those social interactions. That's all.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for that. And thank you for talking about, how the goal of homeschooling can be less to isolate your child, but more so to focus on the child's individual needs, because a traditional classroom setting, again, is not always set up for individual needs. It's set up for a collective group of kids and, their needs. So I do appreciate you, stating that, because it's so important, and it is a detail that is just so overlooked. Can you talk a little bit about anti-resistance homeschooling and what that means?
Sure. So I had to figure out a way to help parents who weren't in a position to afford one-to-one coaching with me. Not everyone is, but a lot of people struggle with homeschooling. So I developed the anti-resistance homeschooling roadmap to be able to give parents an understanding of where resistance comes from. Because it's really hard when you have a neurodivergent or high needs child to make the adjustments in how we think about their behavior, especially when it comes to learning. So when a child says, no, I can't do that, or maybe they don't say it, maybe they put their head on the desk, maybe they crumple the paper, maybe they throw the pencil, maybe they scream and run and slam a door. There's all kinds of ways that our kids express their resistance. They make it very clear that this is not something that they can do. And because, especially if we've had our kids in a school before homeschooling or from our own schooling experience, we are kind of conditioned to think, okay, my kid is just putting on a show to get out of doing work. They don't want to do it. They're lazy, they're apathetic, they're unmotivated. And it's my job then to get them to do this assignment, because that's the assignment and they don't want to do it. So I have to get them to do it. And in the course of that, a whole lot of mess, conflict happens. And I'm sure if you know what I'm talking about, you really, really, really know what I'm talking about. I know what I'm talking about. I've had those experiences where oh, you're tired. That's okay. Just finish. And then we can do something fun. So we usually tend to try with some motivation. I know you can do it. You're so smart. Just try. I'm here. You can do it. So we start out as cheerleaders. Then maybe we say, oh, just get it done and you can have some screen time. You can have your favorite food. We can do a game, right? So that kind of motivation. And when they still can't do it, then it tends to be the negative consequence. Okay, because we start to get frustrated. Okay, this is your work. This is your school. This is your education. You need to do this. And if you don't, then this negative thing is going to happen to you. And so what the roadmap does is it offers a completely different way of understanding that behavior. And, not to kind of give the whole thing away, but to say that behavior is a form of communication. And we know that we have to experience that all the time with our kids. And they can't always verbalize exactly what is wrong and what they need, but they are expressing that they have a need that isn't being met. And they're establishing a boundary when they say no. And we see that with our 2-year-olds, with toddlers, when they start to say no, they're establishing a boundary. They're saying, I am an independent person. I am my own person. I have my own ideas, and I am not just going to do what you tell me to do. And so with neurodivergent kids, they are just simply not going to passively, docilely do that assignment. If it's not right for them, if they're not able to do it for whatever reason, then they can't do it. So the roadmap I put together is to help parents shift their framework, shift their understanding of the behavior so that we can shift our behavior and how we respond and how we communicate with our kids so that it doesn't have to turn into a power struggle and a blow up and a meltdown and crisis. And we can actually begin to play a supporting role in those moments of resistance to help our kids get past it and continue to learn and be on track. So that's what I put together. And I have a few other digital products also that help. That's the first part, is the resistance. And then there's a master class on homeschooling with triggers. And then there's another training on, the fully integrated homeschooling method so that you can actually have a higher level learning taking place during homeschooling. So many of our neurodivergent and high needs kids are actually incredibly intellectual and intellectually advanced, even if their skill set doesn't always match that. So you can have this incredible conversation and maybe the child can't write all of those words down on a piece of paper, but they have the thoughts, they have the ideas. So how do we create learning experiences that challenge them intellectually while at the same time building up their skill set so that they're developing and advancing all the way around? So those are the kinds of things that I've been putting together to help parents in addition to the one-on-one coaching. So it really does start with that anti-resistance homeschooling roadmap, because it's the resistance that tends to, kick off the conflict, the power struggle, and then the exhaustion and the doubts and the fears and the worry on the part of the homeschooling parent. So it has to work for both. Homeschooling has to work for the parent and has to work for the child. And if we can help our kids understand their own resistance, if we understand their resistance and we help them with it, it can be a lot calmer. And that's my commitment. I don't want parents struggling or feeling like a martyr because they feel that they really don't have a choice and they have to homeschool their kids. So that's what it's about.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that. There was a lot of good information there and a lot of things that I could relate to. Not so much, I don't homeschool, but during the pandemic, my son was doing distance learning and oh my gosh, he had to write a sentence. It was the end of the world. It was and again, like, he was perfectly capable of writing the sentence, but like his brain was way above. It's that physical step of writing that sentence that was just such a problem for him. Mm-hmm. The physical aspect with his fine motor struggles. So I think that the school has made a combination for him to have access to like speak to text and things like that. And then if you gave him writing exercises that were targeted for his writing level, they weren't targeted for his intellectual level. Like you said, it was like, right, Bob is chasing the ball and he's academic everywhere else way past that. And he's like, why am I doing this? This is mm-hmm. obnoxious. Like, so I can completely, maybe not completely, but in a lot of ways relate to what you're saying. I never homeschool my children. I'm actually the parent who is like terrified of the thought of even having my kids home all day with me. I sound like a great mom, but it's my break. But what would you say to a parent who is, maybe this would be a great avenue for them, but they're really reluctant?
Yeah, I think that, first I want to say, whether or not you homeschool, you still are teaching your child at home as a parent. And maybe there's homework that is a source of struggle, right? So I definitely think that some of the stuff that I'm saying applies across the board. But I think what we're seeing more and more actually is that public schools are really not equipped to create adequate learning environments for neurodivergent and high needs kids. So it's one thing if a child is in like a special ed classroom that's 1-to-1 or 3-to-1 ratio and gets an incredible amount of support. But for children who are in a general classroom with 20 something other kids or 30 something other kids, it's all about behavior management. And so any individual child who can't just go with the program and is going to, put a wrench in the gear, then really the schools basically want those kids out. Either they want them, forced to conform and to be able to behave appropriately so that everything goes smoothly, or the recommendation is your child needs a different setting. So that, that's a whole other podcast about that situation, and should it be like that? And, kids should actually get the resources they need. But what it speaks to is the kids simply cannot connect with the learning that they're being given. And there's very little control now over what that learning is in school. So a lot of it is to prepare for standardized tests. A lot of it is, a program, a curriculum that the district has purchased that they don't even really think about, is this best practice anymore? It's the fashion, it's the trend, it's the thing we're doing. So if it doesn't work for your child, then it's basically said, okay, well then you do it, you figure it out. So I understand that can be very, very daunting, very scary. It's an awesome responsibility to be in charge and responsible for your child's education. So the way to think about it, I think, is if you're able, it's a totally different experience than school. Homeschooling is different than your schooling experience, and it actually is a pretty amazing, awesome thing because there aren't any rules. The rules are what works for your child and you. So yes, we know that there are different subject matters, but schools teach them in isolation in a way that doesn't make any sense, because math is not separate from art, and art is not separate from science. They all are integrated. They weave together. It's part of one existence in the world and what is happening in the world. And so there are all kinds of different approaches to education. So what I work with parents on is, those who are open to it. I know a lot of parents just want to buy the curriculum and not have to think about it and just do the next assignment. But I have to tell you, packaged curriculum is not a one-size-all solution. So if your child wasn't really gelling with the assignments at school, it is highly unlikely that they're going to be okay with a workbook or these set assignments and, read this and answer the comprehension questions. Your child is saying, I need to have meaning in my learning. I need to connect to my learning. I need this to be intellectually stimulating and intellectually challenging, and also recognize my skill set and give me the opportunity to develop my skills. So packaged curriculum doesn't assume prior knowledge because they can't, but they do assume a skill set because they're for a grade level. And so it's very hard to get a curriculum that you don't have to modify. So if you want a curriculum to know what to teach, that's all great, but you probably have to modify it to make sure it's going to actually fit your child and where your child is at. But there's other ways to approach learning, which is, comes from like Bank Street School of Learning in New York City, and some things from Teachers College at Columbia, which is to actually integrate the subjects together. So you choose one topic like ancient Egypt, and all the different subjects flow from that topic. So the child doesn't feel like they are doing math now and doing reading now and doing spelling now. So usually traditional learning, traditional schooling, and a lot of packaged curriculum is very skills-based. So the child is painfully aware that they are working on a specific skill. And the kind of learning that I do and that I write about and that I help parents with is focused on the subject matter, on the knowledge, on the hands-on project-based interaction with this new learning that is so interesting that then the skills are secondary. So when the child does the skills, it's a means to an end that they want to get to. So they're not hyper aware of it, and they're more willing to try and to do the skills that they struggle with, because it doesn't feel like a struggle. So, and then you have activities that use more than one subject at once. And you don't have to plan different lessons or get all these different curricula. So this is the reading lesson, this is the math. It's too much. It's way too much. So this is streamlining to create, a world of learning around one, it centers around one topic, and you really focus on that knowledge and weave the skills into it in a way that's just a lot more fun for everyone. I love to have fun. I love to laugh. I love to joke. And I have a child with a whole bunch of sensory issues. And, if I say the wrong thing, there's going to be a meltdown. If something doesn't feel right or doesn't smell right, there's a meltdown. So I have to live my life constantly preventing uncomfortable situations for my child. And I really want to just have fun. Like, I didn't sign up for this to battle, right? That's not why I'm homeschooling. So that's really the thing. There's so many different ways to learn something. So we have to kind of shed our school experience. It's helpful to start to think about what you didn't like about school and how boring some things were, and how you felt forced to do things, and how you spent your day learning how to exist in a classroom with your teacher's rules and ignore your needs. You can't be thirsty. You can't be hungry. Sometimes you can't go to the bathroom. It's not the right time. You have to line up. You have to stand still. You have to do that. But why? That's behavior management so that a building with hundreds of children can function. It's not because that's best practice for human development. That's about how schools work. So if it's your child or your children, we're talking about a very small number of people in a much different sort of space. So there's no reason why a kid that needs to be active can't be jumping up and down while they're learning to count by fives. There's no reason why they can't be hanging upside down reading a book. I mean, there's really no reason, because they're children learning, and this is not who they're going to be when they're 18 years old. This is who they are now. And they're on a whole journey of development. So no 5-year-old that's how a 5-year-old is not an indication of who they're going to be when they're 20. You don't have to worry about what kind of school they're going to get into or what kind of job they're going to have. If they don't do the assignment, then how are they going to function in society? They learn because there's a process of development. And, neurodivergent, high needs or not, most humans don't really figure out how to function in society until they're in their early 20s. It's like really, it's a process. There's a process of development. And it's hard for us to see that because we get so scared and we get so worried and we want everything for our kids, and we're so worried that we're going to mess it up. But it's really hard to mess it up. I think the messing it up part comes when we don't understand the behavior. And so we look for the control and authority option because that's what we experienced, rather than go for the communication and the collaboration and the real sense of like we're working together. So when parents choose the power and the authority and the control, that's really when things go in a negative direction, because that is then connected to a child's learning. And you don't really want learning to read to be about power and control. You want reading to be something that is loving, that's a positive experience. The child wants to do it for the rest of their life. And that is really hard because there's a lot of pressure and there's a lot of stress and there's a lot of frustration. And there's a lot of what we bring to it from our experiences that we have to know what to keep and what to get rid of, because we have a child that experiences the world and processes information completely different than we do. So that's really the challenge of it. So I don't really know what to say to you. I think you can be scared, but do it scared, and then take action to take steps to make it a really positive experience for everyone. And if it isn't, then get some help, because it can be. No matter how bad it is, it absolutely can be really fantastic.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I heard a lot in there that I can agree with, that I can personally relate to. I can tell you about my son at 5 years old walking around picnic tables, just in a circle around picnic tables, naming all the presidents in order, in the adults, and as he's just all the things, and we had my older son has been outplaced from public school. He's been outplaced to a school that's for kids who are, more neurodivergent. We're very fortunate that we have a great school 10 minutes from our home. And when we were interviewing there and he was telling them things that he knows and talking to them, he was just pacing back and forth. And they were like, we could just strap a desk to him and let him go and get it. But that's how his mind works. His mind actually works better and he's more focused when he's moving and not thinking. And I know it sounds crazy, but I'm the same way with my ADHD. A lot of times I'm more focused when I'm not thinking about what I'm doing. If I'm doing a secondary task while I'm trying to do my main task, I kind of complete my main task better, like watching a YouTube video and cleaning the house, or, it's just, and it doesn't make sense, but it's how my brain works. And my son's brain tends to be similar. Also, you talked a little bit about, applying information to a singular topic. Again, I was fortunate enough in high school to be in an applied program where we did like applied physics, and physics was the main one. And basically what all of our classes revolved around what we were learning about in physics at the time. And one of the requirements or suggestions for the class was you didn't have to memorize the formulas. You needed to know where they went. And that was a lesson, that sub lesson stuck with me bigger than a lot of the lessons that I learned, because those physics formulas, I haven't used them in my adult life. And realistically, they knew most of us probably weren't going to use. But it was more important that we learned how to apply the information that we did know and how to find the information we didn't know and how to apply it where it needs to be. That's a skill that I feel like just isn't taught in school enough. That is because school is so literal, and it's like they give you a worksheet and, divide this, rather than we're going to solve this. This is a real life problem. We're going to solve it. We need to know what we need to know to solve it. And I just love that when you're teaching that way, you're teaching so many layers of education. You're teaching how to solve problems. You're also teaching the math and the reading and the other things involved in it. But you're teaching the more important skill of problem solving that so many people just don't get till later on in life. I don't know if you have thoughts on that or.
Oh, completely. I mean, there's been a whole transformation of public education that is really hard to spot. It's easier when you're older to spot it, because I remember when I was in school and it's so different. But the whole shift towards standardized testing has really eliminated so much of the creative, critical, independent thinking component. And it's so difficult because that is really what people understand as schooling. If they went to not just public school, but if you went to Catholic school, if you went to a country day school, a prep school, it's very authority. It's very top down. It's very, here's the assignment, do it. When you look at other types of learning, it looks completely different, other types of schools. And I was fortunate. I went to public school until the last 3 years of high school. And those 3 years of being in a high school without any grades, where we got to pick our schedules, it was sort of college based, but you could take far more classes than, you could stay till 6 o'clock in the evening, and I could do Shakespeare acting. I loved acting and singing then. So I did musical theater, Shakespeare acting, a whole bunch of things, music and computers, electronics as my science, yoga as my gym. It was like, some of it was a bit silly, right? I wouldn't say I really had much physical education, but to have that experience where the academic classes are us sitting around a table reading and discussing things. And yes, I wrote papers, but it was that my ideas were the most important. My interaction with the text and us discussing it was the most important thing. And that's the same model that Harvard, other Ivy League universities, they don't have too many massive lecture halls. It tends to be smaller seminars with people sitting around a table discussing. And so, what I bring as a homeschool coach is knowledge of all these different styles of educating, because people think, oh, it's Montessori or it's Waldorf or it's Charlotte Mason. You like pick a method and you stick with it. But it's really, like you said, Sarah, it's really about engagement, and it's solving problems. Once you have to solve a problem, you have to think independently and critically. So I always say, real learning, high level learning is the ability to apply knowledge and skills to a brand new situation. Then you have really learned it. And when you do that with your hands, you learn it even more. So a project where you're writing and you're constructing and you're drawing and you're doing all these different things to create this incredibly complete demonstration of what you've learned, it is very exciting because that is 100% child-led. They are deciding how. So I understand if you're listening to this and you're like, that's impossible. I can't do that. My kid would make a mess. How can I possibly structure that? How can I do that? Yeah, no, I understand. But there is a way to get to that, because there is a way to create the learning experience where the child develops a habit in that sort of environment. You create the environment and you get to the point where your child is very independent. So at this point I can say, okay, we finished our unit, you need to do a project, here's my idea. And my kid's idea is always so much better than mine. And then they're so excited because it came from them that they want to do it. And then they do it to the best of their ability. And I'm facilitating that. I'm not doing the work of it. So that's that's one thing that I think helps parents be a little more relaxed about it a little bit, is that your job is to facilitate, is to create the experiences. You don't have to be the expert of the knowledge. You don't have to know all the answers. You just have to create the experiences, facilitate, support, help teach the things when needed. If you don't know, then find the answer and tell your child you don't know, because then you teach them how to find the answer, right? But then it all comes down to problem solving and critical thinking. And that problem solving is such an important skill for our neurodivergent and high needs children to have, because especially if they have triggers, they need to know how to problem solve the things that set them off, the things that trigger them. They need to know how to deal with it so that it doesn't have to become a crisis every single time. They have to know, oh, I don't like that kind of food. I don't like that texture. I don't like that sound. So when there's a sound I don't like, what am I going to do? So if we're always telling them what to do, they don't develop the skill to figure it out on their own. And that's over the years that we get to teach them, that's what they need to then go out in the world and function independently. They have to know how to solve a problem, how to ask for what they need, how to change what is causing the upset so that they're not upset anymore. That's why it's so important that parents don't dismiss the upset. So if a child says, no, I can't do this, if the parents don't do it anyway, you have to do it. That actually we have to get in there and ask those questions and work with our kids to help them figure out what can be done, what is the obstacle, and what can be done to remove that obstacle. And that creates a totally different, that's why it's transformative. It doesn't seem that hard to do, but it is if that's not your style and that's not how you grew up and that's not how you were treated. You have to, it's a totally different way of doing it. So it can seem impossible. It can also seem like that's really not that hard. What's the big deal? But doing it, the practice, figuring it out, and then relating that to the learning, once it all comes together, you can kind of see how it becomes like really fun and kind of chill. Like, this is what we're doing and these are the activities. And now, we've got our books, we've got our experiments, and we're seeing how it all fits together with ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, whatever. And then, okay, now you get to do a project and here are some ideas and what are your ideas and all that sort of stuff. So, then there's all that openness and flexibility to figure out what that means for your child. And maybe it's not ancient Egypt, maybe it's trains, because your child loves trains. And you can teach every subject through trains if you had to, you could do it K through 12. There's really not a shortage of learning that you can do with trains, right? Or dinosaurs or whatever the thing is that your child gravitates towards. So presidents, right? Oh my gosh, how much learning about every single thing could you do if you're focused on the presidents of the United States, right? So I think it's just, I understand it's a just completely different way of approaching learning. And if you've never experienced that, it's really hard to even have a sense of what that looks like or that it's possible. But I don't know, that's why I exist, because I can not only give you that vision, I can then help you get there step by step. So it doesn't have to be this like awful, controlling power struggle mess.
No, I love it. I think that that's great. So my next question for you is, how do you find, as a parent who's homeschooling, how do you find time for yourself? Because you're with your kids all the time. How do you find time for a break or for self-care?
So that I smile because as a parent, how do you find time for yourself? No, but that is like the question. So that answer is age and development specific. If you have a younger child, or a child who needs more support and can't really be left alone, that is really tough. And maybe you have a partner who, this is the learning time, and when that learning time is over, or maybe, after dinner, you have a partner who can step in and you are off. You are totally off the clock for an hour. You can take a bath, you can go read a book, you can do something. Those after school activities where the kids get to socialize become, I think, really important because you don't have to be on. So yeah, you have to take them, maybe you have to sit there and watch, but you don't have to be on, monitoring, supervising, talking, guiding, participating. We love our kids and it's so awesome when they talk and have ideas, but it also is exhausting when it's hours and hours of talking to another. There are times I just don't want to talk to anybody for a while. And that's where boundaries come in. And so, I'm going to bring it back to resistance, because when a child says, no, I can't do this, they're establishing a boundary that we need to respect, so that when we need to establish a boundary, they're learning to respect our boundaries because we're respecting their boundaries. And boundaries become really key, especially when you're homeschooling, because there's a time for this, there's a time for that. So if, you give your child screen time so that you can go do something else, well, then that really needs to be their screen time, and they really can't come and look for you. And I know that's really hard, and that's developmental, because kids go through times where they want to be more independent and be left alone. And then the next week, even though they're 10, they're acting like a 5-year-old again, and they want their mommy, and they're very clingy, and, there's some patience involved. But I think having, family, things like family reading time, having screen time, having design challenges, playtime, creating some spaces in the home where you can be near your child, but you don't have to be like on, as I say, like you don't have to be really, using energy and focus. I think that's part of it. Those after school programs are going to be really key, and having some kind of outside support, if it's from your partner, if it's, I don't know who's in your life, if there's a grandparent, if you can afford a babysitter, but definitely it's hard. It's really hard to, parent 24/7. So, trying to get creative with that. And, I'm in a situation where I don't have that much family around that's available to do childcare. So we very much, my partner and I very much have to tag team and continuously negotiate those boundaries. It's, these are children that you can't establish a boundary and expect it to stick forever. You have to constantly have conversations and discuss them. But having your child involved in things that they really want to be doing, it makes it less likely that they will come looking for you, because they will be engaged in something that they want to be engaged in. So that's kind of the trick. It all really comes down to what's the kid doing? What are those experiences? What's the learning? What are they reading? Are they reading what you want them to read? Are they reading what they really want to read? If a child wants to be doing that thing, they will do it. And it just makes it so much easier for you as the parent.
Yes. And thank you so much for that. And really quick, what is your favorite form of self-care
Self-care, you said?
for you?
For me, I think it's a toss-up between, just watching Netflix and airing out my brain, which is probably not the most, common for you. But also, I really love matcha. And so, like, sometimes I call it my joy, and sometimes I call it my will to live, depending on how my day is going. But to sit with an iced, matcha latte and just drink it and like watch something or listen to some music and just not have to talk to anyone is like absolutely my self-care. So if there are any homeschooling parents out there who can do it without caffeine, let me know. I would be I want to know your secret. Like I always say I can't do this without some kind of artificial substance giving me some energy. So anyway.
No, there's nothing wrong with that. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with watching TV as self-care. Like, I think that that's like one of the most, I don't know, frowned upon self-care methods that we all do every day. You know what I mean? Like everybody has their favorite TV show or whatever. That's a form of self-care. I say do it. If it makes you feel good and it gives you a break, gets you away from whatever problems you have for a half hour, an hour, 2 hours, whatever it is, and by all means. But my final question, where can my audience find you?
So I am super, super, super easy to find. MLCcoaching.com is my website. That is the easiest. And Instagram, it's you just flip my name. It's Moradian.Afsaneh on Instagram. You can send me a DM. I will read it and I will respond. I am really not hard to find at all.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I will have the link to your Instagram and your website in the description of the show notes for this episode. And I want to thank you so much, Afsaneh, for coming on. This was a really cool interview, and I learned a lot about like homeschooling modalities and how maybe that's not something that I should just shut out. Like, you've inspired me to research it more. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Sarah. If you have a great school, don't knock it. If your kids are happy and in an educational environment, you don't have to feel compelled to take that all on your shoulders. But
my thought
is
is
really,
if this doesn't work, if where he's at doesn't work, then this is the next step. My youngest son will probably stay in public school because I need the break. His needs are so extensive that it's just he's that kid that you can't take your eyes off of, and him being in school is a huge break for me. So, and that's
sure.
And like you said, that's okay too. So
well, it's two sides to the same coin. We just want our kids to have what they need and to thrive. So if your child has an IEP and that IEP is not being met, you do have avenues to take to, fight for the right for your child needs to be met in a school setting, right? So I don't want parents to ignore that or not know that they have that right, or that I just spoke with a parent who didn't know that she should get an IEP for her child who's on the spectrum. So there are a lot of rights, and you should know your rights and you should know your options. And it's really when you feel like there just isn't an option that would be as good as you doing it yourself. You love your child more than anyone else. You know your child better than anyone else. So if you have the ability to do it, it's not a awful thing to homeschool, but it is a lot of time and it is a big commitment. And I don't think it should be an expectation of being a parent that you're also assuming responsibility for your child's education. And it really has to be what's best for the child, what are the options, and then how do you make it work for you. So because I know there's a whole trend towards homeschooling, but my gosh, we pay taxes. And there are public schools, and I don't think we should all just, take it on unless we really don't have a choice and we really need to step in so that our kids can thrive, because that's what we want.
Exactly. And, many families, that's not an option for them. Both parents work outside of the home. And, it's many families that's not an option. And that's okay too. Um, but again, I really do appreciate this. This was very eye-opening to me because, again, with the stigma with homeschooling, the awkward kid in the prairie dress, who's hyper religious or mom is anti-vax or whatever, you know what I mean? Whatever their reasoning is. That's what my brain always goes to when I hear of homeschooling. I never thought about it being what's best for this kid as an individual. Um,
Mhm.
thank you so much for that. We did share your website, and that will wrap up this week's episode of Caregiver Chronicles. Again, thank you so much. And if you would like to support our podcast, you can. We're on Buy Me a Coffee and Ko-Fi, but the best way to support us would be to like, share, and subscribe to our episodes. If you really liked what you heard, or somebody who's homeschooling who's having a struggle, please share this episode with them and give us a thumbs up and a like or a rating or a review, and all of that supports this podcast more than anything else. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.